Welcome to another of our contested collections series, in which we delve into the museum's ethnology collections for a closer look at some of the hidden histories and untold stories that these objects can tell us. Today we'll be looking at some items from the museum's South African collections, which were collected by Sir Arthur Havelock whilst he was Governor of Natal during the British occupation of South Africa, and donated to the museum by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Lyons of Appleton Hall. The items that we are looking at include a miniature beadwork hat and a beadwork girdle. The hats were traditionally made in Zululand, and the beadwork is not so much decorative but more a means of communication between men and women. The colours are selected and combined to create different messages that are woven through the designs. So who were Sir Arthur Havelock and Charles Lyons? In 1886, Sir Arthur Havelock became Governor of Natal, where he dealt with the annexation of Zululand in 1887 and an unsuccessful rebellion in 1888. He returned to England in 1889 and served on the International Anti-Slavery Commission in Brussels. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Lyons of Appleton Hall was assistant to Sir Arthur Havelock whilst he was later Governor of Ceylon, and Charles also married Havelock's daughter Rachel in 1895. It is likely that the objects that we're looking at today were collected during their work and travels within South Africa. The province of Natal was a province of South Africa from May 1910 to May 1995. Natal was proclaimed a British colony on the 4th of May 1843 after the government had annexed the Boer Republic of Natalia. A British governor was appointed to the region and many settlers emigrated from Europe and the Cape Colony. The British established a sugarcane industry there in the 1860s, but local farmers had difficulties attracting Zulu labourers to work on their plantations, so the British brought thousands of indentured labourers from India. During the height of colonial expansions preceding the 19th century, planters and industrialists in European colonies around the world relied heavily upon slavery for their massive profits, including the sugar plantations in South Africa. Experiments revealed that sugar cane would thrive in the colony, but with the abolition of slavery, farmers and industrialists had to resort to some other form of cheap labour, which in this case would be in the form of indentured Indian labourers. The indentured Indian labourers came about through the crisis in labour that occurred in Natal, where Zulu workers were not prepared to carry out work on plantations within the sugar industry. Shortly prior to the indentured Indians' arrival in Natal, India had been going through a very difficult period of disease and poverty. This led to large numbers of the local population seeking a better life elsewhere, and when offered the opportunity to work in Natal, this sounded like a good option. However, very few were actually told about what life was really going to be like on the plantations, the long hours that they would work, and the harsh conditions under which they were kept. There was a high volume of illiteracy in India during this period, which also didn't help matters, as few of those wishing to immigrate to Natal could actually read the agreements that they were signing. About 2/3 of the indentured Indians were from rural areas and 1/3 were women. Most of the Indians came on a 5-year contract, but their lives were in fact more like slaves. They were tested medically before they travelled and had to withstand a 2-month journey and 10 years of hard work. On the 16th of November 1860, a ship named the SS Belvedere carrying 342 indentured Indians arrived in South Africa. In fact, between November 1860 and 1911, nearly 152,000 indentured labourers from across India arrived in Natal. Today, South Africa is home to one of the largest populations of people of Indian descent, approximately 1.5 million on the African continent. The majority of them are the descendants of the indentured workers brought to the colony between 1860 and 1911. As previously mentioned, there is a significant population of South Africans with heritage descending from indentured labourers and migrants who first arrived in the country in 1860. The majority live in and around the city of Durban, making it one of the largest Indian populated cities outside of India. During the colonial era, Indians were accorded the same subordinate status in South African society as the native South Africans were by the white minority. During the period of apartheid from 1948 to 1994, Indian South Africans were called out terms such as Asians or Indians and were legally classified as being members of a single ethnic group. This was viewed by some Indian South Africans as an improvement on the other negatively defined identities of their previous status, which they were given, such as non-white. Indian South Africans wanted to show both their heritage and local roots, and so increasingly self-identified as African, South African, and when necessary, Indian South Africans. During the most intense period of segregation and apartheid, Indian, Asian, coloured and Malay group identities controlled numerous aspects of daily life, including where a classified person was permitted to live. The apartheid government strictly codified the physical and cultural boundaries between race groups and encouraged group identities. As a result of the apartheid rules, South Africans continue to identify themselves and each others as blacks, whites, coloureds and Indians. Indian South Africans continue to be viewed and treated as a foreign presence in the country even after 150 years of living in South Africa and being officially recognised as part of the population since 1961. They still find themselves having to justify their belonging to South Africa. Indians face discrimination to varying degrees in all parts of South Africa. In late 19th century Natal, they faced repressive legislation such as being forced to carry passes. It was only with the arrival of Gandhi to the country in 1893, who also experienced racial discrimination, that there was a proposal to implement legislation restricting Indian voting rights in Natal and helped to organise a resistance, which ultimately led to the formation of the Natal Indian Congress. The resistance led to the unification of disparate groups of South African Indians for the first time, and a bill was successfully introduced in 1896. Indian labourers not only travelled to South Africa for work, but also to further afield countries such as the Caribbean. These, like the Indian South Africans, were descendants of Indian indentured workers brought by the British, Dutch and French during the colonial era from the mid-19th century to the early 20th century. Even though they were in a different country to their homelands, they still managed to celebrate and embrace their traditional culture, such as dance and food. Between the years 1838 and 1917, over 500,000 Indians from former British India and colonial India were taken to 13 mainland and island nations in the Caribbean to address, similarly to in South Africa, the demand for sugarcane plantation labour following the abolition of slavery. The passing of the 1833 Slavery Abolition Act resulted in many formerly enslaved people leaving their enslavers, creating an economic chaos for European planters in the Caribbean and Indian Ocean. In 1838, the first ships carrying indentured labourers for sugarcane plantations left Calcutta in India. By some estimates, over 2.6 million people in the Caribbean are of Indian origin. Many have also ethnically blended with migrants from other parts of the world. There were many more women emigrating into the Caribbean than men, a ratio of around 3 to 100. Indian women who were recruited and immigrated were for the most part married women joining their husbands, single women, women who had been widowed, women trying to escape poverty, and women prostitutes. Under the indenture system, married Indian women were excused from work on the plantations, and planters were required to give them medical care and rations. However, the colonial government did not recognise Hindu or Muslim marriages until the 1940s, so many married women were categorised as single and did not receive the few privileges given to married women.